Tonight, before you fall asleep, try something strange. Try to describe, out loud, the exact route you took home today. Not the destination, the route. Every turn, every landmark. The shape of the road before the last intersection. The building on your left just before you arrived. Most people cannot do it. We move through the world now guided by a small blue line on a glowing screen. It tells us when to turn, when to merge, when we've arrived. And somewhere along the way, without noticing, we stopped learning the landscape we live in. Now imagine erasing that blue line, erasing the roads, erasing the signs, erasing the satellites hanging silently above your head. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest you have never seen, with a child on your hip, a container of water on your back, and a decision to make about which direction leads to something that will keep you alive. This was the ordinary condition of being human for almost the entirety of our story. And here is the mystery. Somehow, without paper, without compasses, without printed maps of any kind, our ancestors walked out of Africa and crossed nearly every landscape on this planet. Deserts, ice sheets, mountain ranges, and eventually, open ocean, out of sight of any shore. How? For a long time, the assumption was simple. They wandered. They stumbled. They got lucky. A romantic image of small bands drifting across continents by accident, populating the world through sheer persistence. But the evidence tells a very different story, and once you understand it, you may start to notice something uncomfortable about yourself. Start with a single stone. In the Kenyan Rift Valley, at a site called Sibilo, archaeologists dug up flakes of obsidian, that glassy black volcanic rock ancient toolmakers loved, roughly 200,000 years old. When they traced the chemistry of those flakes back to their volcanic birthplaces, they found something staggering. Most of the obsidian had traveled about 166 kilometers to reach that camp. 166 kilometers, 200,000 years ago. Before writing, before agriculture, before anything we would call civilization. That stone did not walk itself. It moved through hands, through relationships, through roots that someone, somewhere, remembered well enough to use again. And that is the first crack in the old assumption. These were not wanderers. Picture the moment. A small group leaves camp before sunrise. The air is cool. A child is asked to point back toward the sleeping fires. The oldest traveler studies the horizon. Someone repeats a phrase, quietly, almost like a song, naming the sequence of places they expect to pass. A pale cliff, a bend in the river, a tree scarred by lightning, a marsh that smells of rot before you see it. They are not following a map. They are walking through one. Because here is what our ancestors understood, and what most of us have forgotten. A map does not have to be a picture. It can be a sequence of sounds, smells, slopes, and stories. It can live inside a name. It can live inside a body that remembers exactly how far it has walked since the last drink of water. It can live inside a group, where one person knows the springs, another knows the animal trails, another knows the family living beyond the next ridge who will grant safe passage. The map was never a single object. It was scattered across landscape, memory, culture, and other people. It only became visible when someone walked it. And this is where it gets unsettling. Because when anthropologists went looking for this ability in modern hunter-gatherers, they found it. Still alive, still working. Among the Mbendjele in the rainforests of Congo, researchers watched people, including children, point confidently toward locations kilometers away, hidden completely behind walls of trees. In the Bolivian Amazon, Tsimané elders, who had traveled widely through their lifetime, could still identify the direction of distant, unseen villages, with startling accuracy, even in old age. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, GPS trackers revealed daily journeys shaped not by wandering, but by memory, task, and social geography, unfolding across a landscape each person knew in a slightly different way. They were not doing magic. They were doing something we can barely imagine anymore. They were paying attention. Now feel, for a moment, what it meant to lose that attention, to get lost. Getting lost was not being late. It was not an inconvenience. It was a slow-moving catastrophe. Every extra hour drained water from your body. Every wrong turn stretched the distance back to shelter. The sun sank. The children slowed. The expected landmark did not appear. And somewhere in the group, a quiet voice began to admit that the land no longer matched memory. This is why the smartest ancient travelers were not the boldest. They were the ones who knew when to stop, when to scout, when to turn around. Long before disaster, the experienced traveler was predicting the next landmark and comparing it to what actually appeared. If the prediction failed, they froze, they asked questions, they retreated. The great skill was not choosing the right path. It was noticing, early enough, that you were on the wrong one. Your brain still carries this program. You know this feeling. It is that quiet unease when a familiar road takes a few seconds longer than it should. That flicker of panic when a landmark you expected simply isn't there. That relief, almost bodily, when a known building rises into view. That instinct, at the top of a hiking trail, to turn around and study the path from the direction you'll return. None of that is random. It is an ancient system, still watching, still comparing, still trying to keep you alive. Now zoom out. Because the deepest mystery is not how one person crossed one valley, it is how a species crossed a planet. Consider Australia. 50,000 years ago, human beings reached it. To get there, they had to cross open water, in places nearly 100 kilometers of it, out of sight of any coastline. When scientists modeled whether this could happen by accident, by people drifting on debris and getting lucky, the numbers refused to cooperate. Accidental drift could not populate a continent. Something more deliberate was happening. People were building watercraft, gathering enough companions to start a viable population, and pointing themselves toward land they could not yet see, trusting that it was there. And here is the twist that reshapes everything. They did not need to see the destination, not the continent, not the coastline, not even the next century of their descendants' lives. Humanity crossed the world not through one heroic vision, but through thousands upon thousands of short journeys. A group walked to the edge of the known. They scouted. They returned. They talked. They taught. A temporary camp became a named place. A named place became a landmark. A landmark became the starting point for the next generation's edge. Each person only needed to know a little more than their parents. Each journey only needed to be reversible. Each discovery only mattered because someone made it back to tell the others. No one alive at the time understood they were populating a planet. They were only trying to find water, family, refuge, a better season. And in doing so, without a global plan, without a global map, without anyone imagining the shape of the Earth, they slowly wrapped the species around it. Which brings us back to you, to the blue line on the screen, to the road you cannot describe. The tools have changed. The instinct has not. Somewhere inside you, the ancient navigator is still awake, still noticing when a landmark is missing, still turning at the junction to memorize the return, still trusting a stranger's directions over a machine's when something in the landscape feels wrong. Our ancestors did not conquer distance because they saw the world clearly. They conquered it because they learned, generation by generation, how to move through what they could not yet see, and how to come back with a piece of it for the rest of us. The map was never in their hands. It was in their willingness to notice, to remember, to return. And perhaps the strangest question our long journey leaves behind is not how they managed without our tools. It is what our tools are quietly managing without us.